If you're 40 years old and have nothing saved for retirement, here's what I'd do. Because the truth is, the longer you wait, the more ground you have to catch up later. So in this episode of the Property Academy podcast, you're going to learn how to calculate how financially screwed you really are and the 5 steps you can take within the next hour to turn it around. I saw this online, Andrew, somebody asking, what would you do if you were 40 years old with basically no savings for retirement? And this is sadly the reality for a lot of Kiwis. Maybe you reach 40 and you think, what am I going to do to make sure that I'm sorted by the time I actually end up stop working? And so what we're going to do is talk about all of the things you can do within an hour today, if you're watching this or listening to this, to try and get your money life a little bit more on track. So I know, for instance, you're 41 right now. If you were 41, had no money saved for retirement, where would you start?
It's interesting. It's that kind of early 40s is the time that people start to worry a bit more. I guess they're kind of starting to get a bit of momentum in their career. Maybe they've had a kid or had a couple of kids. They've got a house often, but they kind of park the retirement side of things to the side. And then, you may be halfway through your work life and starting to think, well, I don't have half the money that I want in retirement. So then you start to get a bit panicked. I think the first thing of the 5 that we're going to talk about today is figure out how bad the number actually is, how screwed you really are, because this is going to be confronting, and often that's why people don't do it, because it's a scary number. So I think, well, I'll forget about it. I'll leave it till next year, and then next year, and then next year. So you want to go online and use a tool or use a calculator to figure out how much money you need when you stop working.
And even not a calculator, use this calculator. This is the calculator that we've built for you guys, so you can figure out when you stop working, how much money are you actually going to need to survive? So let's quickly go through this. So you live in Christchurch, so you're living in a city, it's going to cost you money. When you stop working, is it going to be just you, or are you going to have a partner?
Well, let's say the 2 of us.
Okay, lovely. Now, what's your retirement vibe going to be? Do you want no frills? Do you want more choices?
Comfortable.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are you going to have a mortgage-free home, or will you have a small mortgage, or will you be renting?
I'll say mortgage-free home.
Okay. And what about, how often are you going to go traveling? Because this is one of the big things that New Zealanders tell us that they really want.
So I want to do annual overseas holidays.
And how bougie are you thinking this is going to be? So
It's
going to be 5-star bougie?
Well, if you call that bougie, okay.
Honestly, you're going for the most expensive one possible. Now, this is an interesting one for you, because I know that you like to cook at home, but you also like to eat out a lot. So you're going to be basically eating a lot at home. Are you going to be eating out every day? Is it just going to be occasionally?
To be honest, I reckon it costs me just as much to eat at home as it does to go out anyway. So just why don't you go with out or delivered almost every day, because I know that'd be more expensive, just because I like some of the expensive things at home.
Okay, and so do you have no car, 1 car, or 2 cars?
2.
Okay, and the very last question, how are you going to fill your days? Is it going to be mainly like walks, TV, library, things that are very cheap? Is it going to be somewhere in the middle where it's like maybe you've got a gym membership, you go out once in a while, or is it going to be the whole shebang?
It'll be the whole shebang. It won't be the shows and the golf, but it'll be the whole shebang.
Well, look, you've basically just chosen like every single most expensive option. So for you, the cost is going to be something like $3,500 a week, or 180 grand per year, with this breakdown that I've got in front of you. And the reason I created this is Kiwis hate budgeting. So even though, like, I could sit here and tell everybody to go create some sort of retirement budget, nobody's going to go and do that, apart from maybe 1 or 2 people who are just like really into spreadsheets. So rather than telling you to create a budget, we just created a calculator instead. Now, knowing how much you're going to spend in retirement, and Andrew's number is very large compared to what a lot of other people do. The next thing you've got to do is figure out, well, are you on track, and are your investments going to be enough to produce that specific level of income for you, right? And the way that you'd do that is you'd create your free Opus Plus account. This is our free software where you can run the numbers on any investment property in New Zealand. You specifically go to the My Wealth Plan section and click Create a Wealth Plan, and you are able to run the numbers, come in here and see, okay, well, if I'm like Andrew and I want to spend $180,000 per year, and I want to do that within 20 years, just warning, by the way, this is going to be a very large number. Well, you're going to need to create a large number of assets, probably about $6.5 million of today's money in order to create that lifestyle, depending on how you want to set it up. And what you've got to do is figure out, well, how close are you to being able to do that? And you can put in things like, okay, maybe you've got a couple of Kiwi savers. Well, how much is that going to contribute to that lifestyle? Well, if you've got a very high goal, maybe a lot, maybe not a lot, depending on how much you're saving. How many properties do you have, and are they going to help you achieve that goal? How much wealth are they projected to make you in the future based on house prices going up and perhaps paying down debt? And to get that number of how screwed am I, that's where we figure out our wealth gap. That's where we figure out, based on what I am currently investing, based on how much money I'm putting into my KiwiSaver, based on how many properties I've got, based on everything I'm doing right now, how much wealth am I on track to have? And how does that compare to the wealth I said that I need to live that lifestyle we just figured out? And this is how you figure out how financially screwed you are. Now, I put in 2 KiwiSavers and a single property for this very large goal, and this person's wealth gap in this example is about $4.9 million. So that's how you figure out how financially screwed you are. Now, I encourage you to go and use these numbers yourself because A, it's free to do, and B, you're going to have quite different numbers. Like if you only wanted to live on 70 grand a year once you stop working, again, off today's money, we inflation adjust everything here, then you might find that you're really on track for that already, and actually you're not that financially screwed. But this is how you figure that out. Now, the second thing you've got to do, once you figure out whatever that goal is, i.e. how financially screwed you are, you've got to figure out, well, how much do I need to save or to invest in order to hit that goal? And I kind of call this the perfect scenario. Now, these numbers get really interesting. So let's say we didn't have a $4.5 million wealth gap. You know, what's the size of wealth gap you would typically see, Andrew?
Say, let's say it's a fairly ambitious one, but not the one I'm working towards. Let's call it 3 mil.
Okay, so let's say that you're like, I really need to save up $3 million. And depending on your income, that's either going to be really high or really small. Like some Kiwis, and a lot of Kiwis, aim just to have $1 million. And $1 million is a large amount of money, right? But typically, you know, that number we've heard in New Zealand being thrown around about how much you need for a comfortable retirement, typically, $1 million seems to be the headline that keeps on coming back. But Andrew wants to be ambitious, so we're going to go for that. So if you are aiming for $3 million, though, and you want that in 25 years, you're not actually aiming for $3 million because that $3 million today isn't going to be worth $3 million in the future because we've got inflation. The price of things go up. So actually, you're aiming for about $4.9 million in this incredibly ambitious goal. Now, let's say that you were investing in term deposits. And the thing about term deposits is you've got to pay a lot of tax. So let's say your after fees, after tax return is about 2.5%. You're going to need to start saving $2,726.21 per week, every week for the next 25 years to make that happen.
Well, that's quite hard.
Very difficult because then you're saving about 125 grand, probably a little bit more than that, 130 grand a year. With tax, you've probably got to earn something like 180 grand to 200 grand, pay your tax and then save that entire salary. Probably not realistic for a lot of people. Let's say that you're going for a balanced managed fund, and let's say again, after tax, after fees, aiming 4.5%. And the reason I say after tax, after fees is this is something that often gets confused in like the online forums and the YouTube comments. You know, we might use a 6% return for an aggressive fund, and people go, "Oh, surely that's a bit low, isn't it?" But you've got to factor in that if you're with an active fund manager, you might be paying them 1.5% as a fee. There may be performance fees on top of that, and actually the return you get out from that can often be a little bit lower. And then you've got to factor in that, well, if an aggressive fund manager ends up producing a 9% return, and that is the average return that they get, what you've got to remember is that the average return is quite different from the compounding return. So typically you need to be more conservative with the compounding. That's just to say, if people are like, why are they using slightly lower numbers? If, Milford or Fisher Funds has said that they just got a 9% return, for example, there's a lot of thinking that goes into that. Now, if you were getting a 4.5% after-tax, after-fees return, you'd have to be saving about $2,000 a week in order to make that big goal happen. If it was an aggressive fund, it'd be about $1,600 per week. But again, if you create your own spreadsheet, you'll get a slightly different number depending on how you crunch them. Now, a lot of people say that's probably not very doable, so maybe I'll do something else. One thing I'd just say, if you cut these numbers down, let's say that you're like, bugger that, $3 million is a lot of money. I'm aiming for $1 million. Then those numbers would, if you're going to cut the goal in a third, then those numbers would also be cut in third as well. But I also know that funds and shares aren't the only way to invest.
Yeah, for a lot of people who have got a very ambitious goal like the one that I used, they're usually building their wealth through things other than saving, so through property or through businesses. So let's say you start a business, and when you retire in 25 years, you sell it for $5 million and you bring in enough money to close your wealth gap. That's awesome. You've done that through one asset without actually savings. Again, you've got to be able to build a business that you can sell for that sort of money. Also, I think if you've got time on your hand, think about it this way. If I needed my $3 million in 30 years, that could give me 2 periods which a property could double in value, right? So if I bought a property for $1 million today, and in 15 years' time it doubled in value, now it's worth $2 million, and then it doubles in value again over the next 15 years, now it's worth $4 million. If I sell it, pay off my $1 million mortgage that I took out at the start, I've got $3 million.
Now, one question a lot of people say is, do you actually think that's going to happen? $1 million house, do you really believe in 30 years it's going to be worth $4 million?
Yes. I think, well, because that would require it to go up by 5% a year on average, and I think that's realistic.
Now, with this, a lot of people say, well, you've just talked about creating the perfect scenario. So we've created a goal, we've understand how screwed we are, we've then said, okay, in the perfect scenario, if we're going to save ourselves rich or we're going to invest, we're going to have to maybe put aside $500 a week into investments, or $1,000 a week, and in some examples we're saying $2,500 a week, depending on what your goal is and the return you think you're going to get. What's step number 3?
Step number 3 is to actually figure out what you can do. So you might have a really ambitious goal. It's really interesting. I work with a lot of young people every now and then who will come in and they'll say, okay, I'm 20 years old. I want to retire as soon as I can, ideally 30, and I want to live on $500,000 a year. But they're earning like $100,000 a year now. That's never going to happen, right? So what they need to do is work out, okay, well, do I need to realign my goals, or do I need to think about how I can maximize the use of my money over the next 10 years in that case? And so often for those type of people, it's a bit of an adjustment in either way. So you want to look at actually, how much can I afford to save, for example? How much can I afford to put into property? How much can I afford to put into shares? And how much of my time could I commit to building a business to figure out what's actually likely? And then if it is unlikely for you to be able to hit your goals with the resources you've got today, maybe think about adjusting your goals down to make them more achievable so you're more likely to hit them. And then remember, if you are 20, 30, and you're not retiring for a very long time, you will probably be in a better position in 10, 20 years if you start investing today, so that you can then carry on to push your goals even further.
The reality is, if you're 20 and you want to retire at 30 on $500,000 a year, you've got to make an obscene amount of money. And probably the only way that I think you could realistically do that would be to go start a company, probably a tech company, grow it massively and sell it off. Now, I say realistically, but I put the probability that somebody actually does that at less than 1% within 10 years. Yeah. The reality is that probably doesn't happen. And if you've got it in your head that is a possibility, or you've seen people do it on Instagram, that is the less than 1%, right? That is the far end of the bell curve. The reality is most people aren't going to do that. Now, when it comes to thinking about what you could realistically do and adjusting it down, one of the things, if you are into investing in property, that I'd recommend you do is, again, jump into Opus Plus. And you can hit that button that says Create AI Plan. And what this does is it looks at all of the information you've put in about your salary, about how many properties you own, about how big your mortgages are, and it tries to forecast, well, how many properties might you be able to buy in the future so that you can get a sense of whether your plan is realistic or not. And so, for instance, I know right now I'm actually not in the position where I can buy another investment property, but maybe I'd be able to buy one in 4 years or so, bang that in, and it looks like that is achievable. Maybe I should add another one in 5 years, and you can choose, what sort of property that might be. Let's say it's going to be in Auckland. Add it in. Looks like that might be affordable based on this scenario. And that gives you a way of balancing the two sides, balancing how screwed am I with also, well, what's the reality of whether I can invest or not? And if I want to use property as a means for growing my wealth, how many properties can I realistically buy? Previously, this has been one of the things that investors have told me they really cared about, they really wanted to see, but it's been very difficult to run the numbers on. And so that's part of that, completely free for people to be able to use. But a big part of this as well, as you're going through this, is then to ask yourself, well, what am I actually willing to do? So one example is like, how many properties can you actually buy? Another of it is to say, well, how am I going to make sure that that is realistic? And the truth of the matter is some people are going to need to make some changes.
Yeah, number 4 is decide what needs to change, because if you keep doing the exact same thing as you're doing today, you can't expect to get a different result in the future. And it could be that you need to cut down your spending. It could be that you need to increase your income. It could be that you're going to move cities and buy a house in a different location with a smaller mortgage so that you can afford to put more money aside or to start investing in property sooner. But the reality is, for most people, if they've got a wealth gap, something's got to change. They're going to have to make some sacrifices now so they don't need to later. And that can come in all different ways, shapes or forms. I'm not saying everyone needs to go quit their job in Auckland, sell their house and move to Christchurch. What I am saying though is you might want to think about, do I need a secondary income to start having some surplus cash to invest, or do I need to start thinking about maybe delaying some of the decisions to go on holiday so that I can invest now?
And the truth of the matter is, none of these choices are free, right? The truth of the matter is, if you are screwed financially and you think you're screwed financially, you are not allowed to sit there on YouTube or podcasts or on social media and say, well, I'm not willing to do any of those, and then be unhappy that you're screwed. Like, if you are unhappy with your financial situation, well, then something needs to change. But if you're not willing to change anything, then, mate, you need to go down to the warehouse. You need to go to the homewares section. You need to spend $15 on a mirror and really look at yourself, because it comes down to you. Like, this is your life. It's not somebody else's life. And writing a mean comment on YouTube or social media about that you didn't like that 2 guys told you that what they thought was the truth about money, that's not going to change anything about your financial situation. Certainly not going to change anything about our financial situation. So we've just got to get on and do what we need to do. Now, one thing I would highly recommend is setting 90-day goals with your partner. And when I say that, I mean written down or typed out goals with you and your partner so you can hold each other accountable. It is amazing what happens once you sit down with your life partner and say, we are going to change our financial situation. I'm going to commit to doing this in the next 90 days. You're going to commit to doing that in the next 90 days. And we're going to sit down and review our goals together in 90 days. That really, personally, I have found changes a lot, because now you've got a lot of accountability. And I personally don't want to sit in front of my wife and feel like a loser telling her that I told her, oh, yes, I'm going to do all of these things. And then 90 days come later. And I'm like, yeah, sorry, dear, that didn't exactly happen, did it? So I find that accountability to be very, very beneficial. But there is a 5th and final step. And again, all of these things you can, in terms of the calculations, you can pretty much do within an hour with free calculators and free tools on the internet. But what's the 5th and final step that you would do if you were 40, you had nothing saved for retirement?
Number 5 is get a financial advisor. So if you've been doing it solo for the last 20 years of your work life and you've actually come up short in terms of where you want to be, then about time to get a professional and actually engage someone to help you out on this journey. And we've talked about different types of financial advisors on the show recently, and what sort of money you might need before you engage one of them, whether or not it's a mortgage broker or someone to invest and manage funds on your behalf, or or whatever type of advisor you're going to use, or a property coach. And you can go back and listen to that if you know whether or not you qualify for those. But I think if you want a better result than what you're getting yourself, then you engage a professional to help you run the numbers and decide how you might structure your money that you've got to be able to invest, or equity that you might be able to invest.
The truth of the matter is, a lot of us Kiwis don't use financial advisors because we think we can figure it out on our own. Now, the thing I say to Kiwis is, well, if you've been figuring it out on your own for 20 years and it hasn't worked, what's going to change in the next 20 years? That's not to say that you can't ever be good with money, but I know that I went to the gym. I know you can't believe this, Andrew, but I went to the gym for like 10 years without a personal trainer, and I saw no real results. I got a personal trainer, and the fact of the matter is not too much actually changed. They teach you a couple of different tricks. They force you and they push you to increase your weights over time. They ask you to change how you're eating slightly, but all of a sudden you start getting results. And what's amazing is, why didn't I get one 10 years ago? I'd be much hotter and healthier than I currently am. God, imagine that, Andrew. I could have been a model.
You'd been unstoppable.
I could have been a fashion model, Andrew, but I'm just a slightly tubby economist because I didn't get a PT 10 years ago.
And again, there's different types of financial advisors you might use. Like if you want to invest in shares, you don't come to Opus Partners because we don't give any advice on that. You go to someone like Ed's partner that works for Emma Capital, and you get some advice on shares. If you want to invest in property, you don't go to Angela, you come to us. If you want advice on getting a mortgage, you go to a mortgage advisor. So again, make sure you get the right type of financial advisor. But getting a financial advisor is going to mean that you're going to get a better result.
And look, if you are pretty serious, or if somebody is very serious about figuring this all out, they're 40, they don't have a lot saved for retirement, they're thinking about it, then if you are looking for a financial advisor and you're interested in property, I'd really recommend going to the Opus Partners website. Again, you can do this within like an hour. Hit that big orange button, book your free session, and within about 5 minutes, find a time you like. Oh, hell, it'll only take you 2 minutes. You'll be able to book in a session and create that wealth plan with somebody, just so that you know that it's done right. I'll drop that link down in the description as well. So those are the 5 steps. Calculate how stuffed you are, figure out what that perfect scenario looks like, see what you can actually do, because maybe you can't do that perfect scenario, figure out what actually needs to change in your life, and get a financial advisor. So now you know what you need to do to retire comfortably, even if you're starting from zero. But if you're now thinking, well, how many properties do I need to retire early? Well, you need to watch this video where you'll learn how many properties you really need, and it might not be as many as you think. Click here to watch it now.